Rejected at the ceremony, the alpha in disguise was comforted when the maid asked if he was okay. The night of the ceremony of choosing arrived under a sky filled with a cold, silver moon. The palace stood tall and proud, its stone walls glowing faintly under torchlight. Music echoed through the grand halls, soft but steady, like a heartbeat that belonged to the kingdom itself. Nobles dressed in rich fabrics moved gracefully across the marble floors, their voices filled with excitement, ambition, and quiet rivalry. Tonight was not just a celebration. Tonight decided power. In this kingdom of wolf-blooded clans, the ceremony of choosing was sacred. Bonds would be formed, alliances would be sealed, and those chosen would rise closer to the throne. Among the crowd, there stood a man no one paid attention to. He wore simple clothes, dark, clean, but without any sign of wealth or status. His posture was straight, his presence calm, yet he seemed to blend into the background like a shadow that did not wish to be seen. No one greeted him, no one called his name. To the court, he was nothing more than a distant noble of weak blood, someone invited out of obligation, not importance. But if anyone had looked closely, truly looked, they would have seen something else, something ancient, something dangerous, because beneath that quiet disguise, he was not weak. He was an alpha, not just any alpha, but the last heir of a fallen bloodline, one that had once ruled with unmatched strength before it was erased from power. Stories about his lineage were still whispered in corners of the kingdom, always in low voices, always with fear. He had survived by hiding, by becoming invisible, by letting the world believe he was nothing, and tonight he had come with a purpose. His golden eyes moved across the hall, observing every movement, every expression. He understood this place better than anyone. He knew the politics behind every smile, the tension behind every polite word. He had not come for celebration. He had come to step back into the world. The ceremony began. At the center of the grand hall, beneath a high dome painted with ancient symbols, a raised platform stood. One by one, names were called. Noblewomen stepped forward, choosing their partners, men who would stand beside them, strengthening their influence and power. Each choice was watched carefully. Each decision mattered. When his name was finally called, a small murmur passed through the crowd. Some looked confused, others looked amused, a few looked disappointed. He stepped forward anyway. Calm, silent, unshaken, the noblewoman who stood across from him was known for her beauty and status. She carried herself with confidence, her chin slightly raised, her eyes sharp with judgment. For a brief moment their gazes met. He did not bow too low. He did not try to impress her. He simply stood there, waiting. The silence stretched. Then she spoke. "I refuse." Her voice was clear, echoing across the hall. A ripple of laughter followed, soft at first, then louder. Some tried to hide it behind their hands. Others did not bother. The rejection was not just personal, it was public, deliberate, a message to everyone watching. He was unworthy. The alpha did not react, not outwardly. His face remained calm, his expression unreadable. But inside, something shifted, something old and buried, something that remembered what it felt like to be cast aside, to be seen as less. It was not her rejection that hurt. It was the reminder that no matter how much power he carried within him, the world still saw what it wanted to see. He stepped back without a word. The ceremony continued as if nothing had happened, as if he had never stood there at all. After a few moments, he turned and walked away. No one stopped him. No one cared. The grand hall faded behind him as he moved through the quiet corridors of the palace. The sounds of music and laughter grew distant, replaced by silence. The air felt colder here, still. He walked without direction, his steps steady but heavy with thought. Torches flickered along the stone walls, casting long shadows that followed him like ghosts. For years, he had lived in control. He had learned to silence his emotions, to lock away anything that could weaken him. Survival had demanded it, but tonight had touched something deeper. He stopped near a tall window. Outside, the moon hung low in the sky, its light pale and distant. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel, not anger, not rage, just emptiness. "You shouldn't stand here too long." The voice was soft, unexpected. He turned. A young woman stood a few steps away, holding a small tray. Her clothes were simple, like those of the palace staff. Her hair was loosely tied back, and her expression held a quiet kind of calm. A maid. She did not look afraid. That was the first thing he noticed. Most people avoided him without even realizing why. There was something about him, something instinctive, that made others uneasy. But she stood there looking at him directly, Not with curiosity, not with judgment, just presence. "The night air gets cold," she added gently. He said nothing at first. He was not used to being spoken to like this, not without titles, not without distance. Her eyes studied him for a brief moment, and then she asked simply, "Are you okay?" The question caught him off guard. Of all the things she could have said, that was not what he expected. For a second he almost answered, but years of habit held him back. "I am fine," he replied, his voice calm, controlled. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words, then she gave a small, knowing nod. "All right," she said softly, "if you say so." There was no pressure in her tone, no disbelief, just acceptance. She turned as if to leave, then paused. "If you need anything, there's tea in the kitchen. It helps on nights like this." Nights like this, he frowned slightly. "What kind of night is this?" he asked before he could stop himself. She glanced back at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "The kind where people pretend not to feel anything," she said, "even when they do." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she gave a small nod and walked away, her steps quiet against the stone floor. He watched her go. Something about the interaction stayed with him. It was not dramatic, not powerful, not important in the way the court measured importance. And yet, it lingered. He looked down at his hand, the same hand that had been rejected in front of everyone. Slowly, he clenched it into a fist, then relaxed it. The tension inside him had shifted, not gone, but changed. He returned his gaze to the moon. For years, the voice of the alpha within him had been constant, strong, commanding, unyielding. It pushed him, guided him, reminded him of who he was meant to be. But now there was something else. A quiet feeling, a strange pull, not toward power, but toward her, the maid who had asked a simple question. The maid who had looked at him and seen something more than what the world believed. He did not understand it. He did not trust it. And yet he could not ignore it. Far away in the grand hall, the ceremony reached its peak. Applause filled the air. New alliances were celebrated. The future of the kingdom moved forward without him. But in the quiet corridor, something else had begun. Something unseen. Something that did not follow the rules of power or status. The alpha turned away from the window. For the first time in years, his thoughts were not focused on survival or revenge or control. They were focused on a single question. Why did her words matter? He started walking again, slower this time, more aware. As he moved through the palace, he noticed things he had ignored before. The soft glow of the torches, the distant echo of footsteps, the quiet life that existed beyond the grand halls. And somewhere within all of it, her presence, unnoticed by others. But impossible for him to forget. That night, as the moon reached its highest point, the alpha stood alone in a silent chamber. But he did not feel the same emptiness as before, because now there was a memory, a voice, a question that refused to leave him. "Are you okay?" And for the first time in a very long time, he did not know the answer. Morning came slowly to the palace, as if even the sun hesitated to rise over a place filled with quiet ambition and hidden tension. Golden light slipped through tall windows, touching the cold stone walls and long corridors. Servants moved early, their footsteps soft, their voices low. The palace had returned to its usual rhythm, as if the events of the ceremony of choosing were already fading into memory. But not for him. The alpha stood alone in a shadowed balcony overlooking the inner courtyard. From here, he could see the daily life of the palace begin, guards changing positions, servants carrying water, nobles walking with pride. Everything looked normal. Yet something inside him was not. His thoughts returned again and again to one moment. A quiet voice. A simple question, "Are you okay?" He frowned slightly as if annoyed with himself. He had faced wars. He had survived betrayal. He had lived years hiding his true nature without breaking. And yet, a single question from a maid had unsettled him more than anything else. It made no sense. He turned away from the balcony, pushing the thought aside. There were more important things to focus on. The court had already begun shifting after the ceremony. Alliances had formed overnight. Power had changed hands in ways that were subtle but dangerous. He could feel it. Something was building beneath the surface, and he needed to stay ahead of it. But no matter how much he tried to focus, his instincts kept pulling him elsewhere. Later that day, in one of the quieter corridors of the palace, he saw her again. She was kneeling near a row of windows, carefully arranging fresh flowers into a long vase. The sunlight fell softly over her, giving the simple moment a strange sense of calm. She did not notice him at first. He paused, watching from a distance. There was nothing remarkable about what she was doing, and yet everything about her felt different, she moved without hurry. Without fear, without the tension that filled the rest of the palace, as if she did not belong to the same world. "You're staring!" Her voice broke through his thoughts. He blinked slightly. She had not turned around, but somehow she knew he was there. "I am not," he replied calmly. Now she turned, a small smile touching her lips. "You are," she said gently, "but it's all right. Most people stare at things they don't understand." His eyes narrowed just slightly. "And you think I don't understand you?" he asked. She shrugged lightly. "I think you don't understand why you're here," she said. The words were simple, but they struck deeper than expected. For a moment he said nothing. Then he stepped closer. "You speak boldly for someone in your position," he said. She tilted her head again, studying him. "And you speak carefully for someone who pretends not to care," she replied. A quiet silence followed. There was no fear in her eyes, no hesitation. It was unsettling. "Why did you ask me that last night?" he asked suddenly. Her expression softened slightly. "Because you looked like you needed someone to ask," she said. "That is not your responsibility." "I know," she replied. "I asked anyway." He studied her face, searching for something, deception, intention, hidden motives, but there was nothing. Just honesty. It confused him. Before he could say anything else, distant footsteps echoed through the corridor. Other servants were approaching. She stepped back slightly, returning to her work. "You should go," she said quietly. "People notice things more in the morning." He did not move immediately. For a brief moment he considered staying. But she was right. This palace was full of watching eyes. Without another word, he turned and walked away. But this time, the silence between them felt different. Days passed. And somehow they kept crossing paths, in the gardens, in the corridors, near the kitchens. Each time their conversations were brief, simple, but never empty. She spoke to him as if he were just another person, not someone important, not someone dangerous, just someone. At first it irritated him, then it confused him, and slowly it began to change something inside him. The anger he carried so carefully started to loosen. The constant tension in his thoughts began to ease, if only for a few moments at a time. He found himself seeking those moments, without meaning to. One evening, as the sky turned deep blue and the first stars appeared, he found her again in the palace gardens. She was sitting near a stone fountain, her hands resting in her lap, her gaze fixed on the water. "You avoid the crowded places," he said as he approached. She glanced up, unsurprised. "They're too loud," she replied. "People talk too much when they're trying to hide something." "And what are you hiding?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "The same thing as everyone else," she said, "just better." He sat down across from her, the distance between them careful but not cold. For a while neither of them spoke. The sound of water filled the silence. Then she asked, "Do you always watch everything so closely?" "Yes." "Why? Because it keeps me alive." Her expression shifted slightly at that. "That sounds tiring," she said softly. "It is necessary." She looked at him for a long moment. "Not always," she said. He did not respond, because part of him knew she might be right. But peace never lasts long in places like this. That same night something changed. The Alpha felt it before he saw it. A disturbance, subtle but wrong. He stood suddenly, his body tense, his senses sharpening. "What is it?" she asked, noticing the shift in him. "Stay here," he said, but she was already standing. "I'm not someone who stays behind," she replied quietly. Before he could argue, a loud noise echoed from the direction of the inner halls. Voices followed, shouting, panic, something was happening. Without another word, he moved quickly toward the sound. She followed, keeping pace despite her smaller steps. As they reached the corridor, the air felt heavier. Guards were rushing past. Servants were stepping back in fear. And then a sudden surge of energy filled the space. Dark, wild, uncontrolled. The Alpha's eyes sharpened. He knew that feeling. It was power, but not controlled power, something dangerous. Before anyone else could react, a figure stumbled forward from the shadows. One of the noble warriors, his expression twisted, his movements unstable. He had lost control. The energy around him lashed out, striking the walls, cracking stone. People screamed. The Alpha moved without hesitation. He stepped forward, placing himself between the chaos and her. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. The energy surged again, stronger this time. For a moment he considered revealing his full strength, ending it quickly. But that would expose him, and he could not risk that, not yet. The unstable warrior lunged forward, power bursting outward, and in that moment something unexpected happened. The maid stepped beside him. "Wait," she said. He turned sharply. "What are you doing?" But she was not afraid. Her eyes were focused, calm. She reached out, not toward him, but toward the chaos. And then the energy slowed, just slightly, but enough. The Alpha reacted instantly, using that moment to step forward and restrain the warrior, forcing the power back down. Silence followed, heavy, shocked. The guards rushed in, taking control of the situation, but the Alpha was no longer focused on them. He turned slowly toward her. "What was that?" he asked. She lowered her hand, her expression unreadable. "Something I shouldn't have shown," she said quietly. His gaze darkened slightly. "You are not just a maid," he said. It was not a question. She met his eyes. "No," she admitted. For a moment, the world around them seemed to fade. Two secrets, now standing face to face. Before he could speak again, voices called out from down the corridor. More people were coming, watching. She stepped back. "Go," she said softly. "You're already being noticed." "And you?" he asked. She gave a faint smile. "I've always been unnoticed," she replied. Then she turned and disappeared into the moving crowd, leaving him standing there with more questions than answers. Later that night, alone once again, the Alpha stood in the same chamber as before, but everything felt different now. The maid was not ordinary, not even close. She carried power, ancient, controlled, hidden just like him. He closed his eyes briefly, his thoughts racing. This was no coincidence, no accident. Whatever this was, it was something far greater than either of them alone. The palace was quieter than usual the next morning. The grand halls, usually filled with whispers and soft footsteps, now felt heavy with unease. Even the sunlight streaming through tall windows seemed hesitant, as if it sensed the tension that had settled over the court. The Alpha walked through the corridors, his gaze sharp, sensing the subtle shifts around him. The nobles no longer laughed at trivial jokes. Servants no longer moved with their usual calm efficiency. Everything was measured, cautious. And for the first time, he realized that being unnoticed was no longer an option. He had survived wars. He had outlived betrayals. He had concealed his identity for years, blending into shadows. But something had changed. The incident in the corridor the night before, the unstable power, her calm intervention, had drawn attention. Even the palace walls seemed to whisper that secrets could no longer stay hidden. He moved to the balcony overlooking the inner courtyard, his golden eyes scanning the activity below. Guards were more alert. Nobles passed quickly, their faces pale or strained. Whispers floated in the air like leaves in the wind, and he caught fragments. "The Alpha, he's here." Not really, but he feared what his exposure would cost, especially her. Meanwhile, the maid moved through the palace with careful steps. Her presence had never been questioned before, but today, every glance from a noble or servant carried suspicion. People whispered, casting small, sharp glances in her direction. And for the first time, she felt the weight of her lineage pressing against her shoulders. It had always been quiet, subtle. Her magic, her strength, had been hidden under the guise of simple duties. But when the Alpha had stepped between her and the chaos, the whispers began. Now the court was questioning not only him, but her as well, and that attention was dangerous. Later in the day, the Alpha found her in the gardens, sitting beneath the ancient oak tree that stood near the fountain. Its twisted branches spread across the sky like veins, casting shadows on the stone path. She was holding her hands in her lap, her expression calm but unreadable. "You should not be here," he said quietly as he approached. She looked up, meeting his gaze. "I am where I am needed," she replied. He studied her, noting the faint tension in her posture, the way her eyes shifted ever so slightly, alert to something he could not yet name. "They are watching," he said. "They always watch," she answered. "But sometimes you have to act anyway." Her words were simple. Her meaning was not. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Do you understand what you did last night?" "I understand more than I should," she said softly, "and that is why I must be careful." His eyes narrowed. "Careful, they will use you. They will use both of us." Her gaze did not falter. "I know." The Alpha's jaw tightened. He had spent years relying only on himself, trusting no one. And yet here was someone who did not fear him, who could act with courage and precision. And she was human, vulnerable. But more than that, she was dangerous. Not because of the magic she carried, not because of her hidden lineage, but because she had begun to stir something in him that he did not understand, something he could not control. That afternoon, the court gathered again. The air was thick with anticipation. The nobles whispered behind fans and half-closed doors, eyes darting toward him and toward her. The Alpha entered quietly, his movements controlled, yet the attention was immediate. Eyes followed him, voices murmured. And then one of the more influential nobles stepped forward, his tone sharp. "You claim to be a noble of this kingdom," the man said. "Yet last night you revealed something unusual, powers not seen for generations. Explain yourself." The room went silent. All eyes turned toward him. He met the noble's gaze, calm but firm. "I do not need to explain myself to those who cannot see." A ripple of murmurs followed. Some whispered of fear, others of excitement, a few of outrage, but the noble's voice cut through it all. "The council demands an answer. You threaten balance whether you know it or not, and there is more." The Alpha stiffened. "More?" "Yes," the noble said, his eyes narrowing. "The girl you were with, she is no ordinary maid. She is of a lineage tied to the old magic. And yet she hides her power. She walks freely while others serve under the law of the court. How do you explain that?" The room gasped. Whispers became louder. Eyes widened. He took a deep breath. He knew this moment would come, but it did not make it easier. "She is not a threat," he said. "Nor am I. We act with reason, not desire for chaos. Those who cannot see this clearly are blind to the truth." The nobles shifted, some frowning, others exchanging uneasy glances. "Blind to the truth?" one demanded. "Do you expect the court to trust you after hiding your power, after hiding your identity?" The Alpha did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned slightly and his eyes found hers. She met him calmly, not with fear, not with uncertainty, but with understanding. It was enough to steady him, just enough. "Then you will leave," the noble finally said, pointing toward the exit, "until the council decides your fate." The Alpha did not resist, not yet, but as he turned, he caught her hand, a subtle gesture. Not a touch of ownership, but of connection. Her eyes held his for a moment, and then she stepped back. The message was clear: protect me, and I will trust you. That night in the quiet of his chamber, he reflected on what had happened. The court knew. His secret was no longer safe. Her secret was no longer safe, and the trust that had begun to form between them had just become fragile. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. He could not blame her for what she had done. She had acted wisely, and yet. Pain twisted in his chest, not from fear, not from the exposure, but from the knowledge that he had failed to protect her completely. For the first time in years, he felt helpless. Meanwhile, she moved through the palace, her own heart heavy. She had done what she knew was necessary. She had acted to contain the danger and protect others. But in the process, she had revealed herself. Her lineage, her power, everything she had tried to keep hidden. And now she feared the consequences, not because she feared the court, but because she had begun to care for him. The Alpha, the one who had walked through life alone, hiding his strength and pain. The one whose calm exterior masked a heart that longed for connection, even if he refused to admit it. She had seen him differently. She had seen the man beneath the disguise. And now the world knew. And that man was vulnerable in ways no one had yet imagined. The following days were tense. Whispers followed them wherever they went. Some courtiers approached with questions veiled in politeness. Others kept their distance, fearful of being associated with them. But through it all, they found moments of quiet, in the kitchens, in the gardens, in empty corridors. Each glance, each word, each gesture, small reminders that they were not entirely alone in this storm. But trust had been broken, not by action, not by choice, but by circumstance. He had hidden his identity. She had hidden her power. And now the truth had been forced into the open. One evening, the Alpha stood once again in the gardens. The moon rose high, silver and cold. Shadows stretched across the stone paths. She appeared beside him as if she had been there all along. "You could leave," he said quietly. "Go somewhere safe." "I could," she admitted. "But then who would stop this chaos?" He looked at her. Her calm courage, her quiet strength, the knowledge she carried in her eyes, it was impossible to look away. "Do you trust me?" he asked. Her gaze softened, but she did not answer immediately. "I want to," she said finally, "but trust is not given lightly, not in this palace. Not in this world." He nodded slowly, he understood completely. "We will find a way," he said, "but not together yet, not fully." Her lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "I know." And with that, she stepped back, disappearing into the shadows, leaving him alone. That night, as he lay awake in his chamber, the Alpha realized something he could not ignore. The court had seen his power. They had seen her lineage, and they had begun to plot. Allies would become enemies, friends would become rivals. And he had no choice but to fight, not only to protect himself, but to protect her. But more than anything else, he realized he could not protect her fully if she did not trust him, and he could not trust anyone else, not fully. Because this world demanded vigilance, control, and power. And yet, there was one thing he had never expected. Her courage had touched something inside him that even years of hiding could not erase. Her quiet strength, her calm determination. And the painful, fragile bond forming between them. It was dangerous, it was impossible, and it was already changing him. The kingdom had fallen into a quiet chaos. Shadows moved through the streets, whispering of unrest. Guards patrolled with sharper eyes and tighter grips. The nobles, once confident in their power, now exchanged nervous glances, their carefully constructed alliances trembling in the air. The Alpha stood at the edge of the palace balcony, the moonlight painting his features in silver. His golden eyes scanned the city below. He had returned from the outskirts where he had spent weeks gathering information and allies, preparing for the storm he knew was coming. But no matter how much he planned, nothing could prepare him for what he felt in his chest. A longing, a need, a silent pull toward her. She was in the palace still. She had chosen to stay, despite danger, despite the court's suspicion, despite the knowledge that standing near him could cost her everything, and yet she remained. The day began with the clatter of hurried footsteps. Messages flew through the corridors. Word of rebellion in nearby lands reached the palace. Bandits, once small threats, were now organizing. Rumors of magic being used to destabilize towns reached even the Alpha's ears. He moved quickly through the halls, his mind calculating, his body always alert. But even amidst the tension, his thoughts returned to her. She moved through the palace with quiet confidence, yet her eyes betrayed the worry she hid. She had begun to understand the depth of her own lineage and the power she carried. She was more than a maid. She was a force meant to balance the world, a force that could heal, protect, and control what had been left wild for centuries. And the court would not accept it easily. Their paths crossed in the gardens again, beneath the same twisted oak tree where so many of their quiet conversations had begun. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, his tone calm but firm. "And leave you to face this alone?" she replied, her voice steady, though her hands were clenched. He studied her. The determination in her eyes, the quiet strength she carried, it stirred something inside him he had never allowed himself to feel fully before. "I cannot let you be here," he said, lowering his voice. "It's dangerous." "Dangerous," she repeated, taking a step closer. "Everything is dangerous, but doing nothing is worse." He shook his head slightly. She was stubborn, brave, reckless. And yet that was the reason he trusted her more than anyone else. "Then we face it together," he said quietly. Her eyes widened just slightly, not in surprise, but in relief. That night the storm began, not a storm of wind or rain, but of power and chaos. The nobles who had turned against him made their move, rallying forces against the Alpha. Dark magic, long hidden in the corners of the kingdom, surged. Shadows stretched across the palace halls. Guards and servants ran in confusion. The Alpha and the Maid moved through the chaos together, side by side. He felt her power weaving quietly through the wild energy around them, steadying it, controlling it. She was no longer simply a maid. She was a force he could rely on, a partner. "You are stronger than you think," he said, his golden eyes scanning the chaos. "You too," she replied, "stronger than you believe, and you will need it all tonight." They fought side by side, not for glory, not for the throne, but for the safety of the kingdom and for each other. In one corridor, the Alpha held back a wave of dark energy that would have destroyed the walls. She extended her hand, and with her guidance he channeled the power, controlling it, reshaping it, redirecting it safely. The walls remained intact. No one was harmed. For a moment time slowed. He looked at her. "You saved me," he whispered. "And you saved me," she replied, her voice calm, unshaken, but soft with emotion. It was the first time they had spoken like equals, no titles, no hierarchy, no disguise. The final confrontation came in the throne room. The nobles who had orchestrated the chaos were gathered there, their faces twisted in fear and anger. They had expected to find the Alpha weak, exposed, alone. But he was not alone. She stepped beside him. For the first time, she did not hide, she did not retreat. She did not hesitate, her power shone quietly, controlled, undeniable. The court went silent. "I am no longer hidden," the Alpha said, his voice steady. "And neither is she. Those who threaten the kingdom will face the consequences, not through fear, but through justice." The nobles faltered. Some whispered, some turned away. They had underestimated the strength of unity, of trust, of courage, and the Alpha knew it. The battle was not simple. Words alone did not calm the storm. Magic clashed. Guards confronted rogue nobles. Shadows moved like living things, trying to claim what they could not understand. But together, the Alpha and the Maid faced every threat. She guided him. He protected her. Each moment, each action, each choice strengthened the bond between them. At one point, a powerful surge of dark energy knocked the Alpha to the floor. She rushed to him, her hands glowing softly as she stabilized him. "You cannot protect everyone alone," she said quietly, her eyes locked on his. "I do not want to protect anyone alone," he replied, his voice low. The words hung in the air, the truth of his heart finally spoken. By dawn, the chaos had ended. The palace was quiet once more. Broken walls had been repaired. Rogue nobles were captured or fled. The kingdom had survived. The Alpha and the Maid stood together on the balcony overlooking the city. The first rays of sunlight touched the rooftops. The streets were calm. People emerged cautiously, looking for signs of safety. He turned to her, his golden eyes soft for the first time. "You stayed," he said. "I could not leave," she replied. He reached out slowly, uncertainly. She met his hand halfway. Their fingers intertwined naturally, without force, without hesitation. "You trust me?" he asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "I do, and you?" "I trust you," he said, and for the first time in years he believed it. In the weeks that followed, the kingdom began to heal. Walls were repaired, markets reopened, guards patrolled with less tension. And slowly the whispers of fear and unrest faded, but the Alpha and the Maid were changed. They were no longer master and servant, no longer hidden and watched. They were equals, partners, a force stronger together than apart. And the bond between them, forged in quiet questions, shared danger and mutual respect, became unbreakable. One evening, under the light of a calm full moon, the Alpha led her back to the gardens. The twisted oak tree stood tall, its branches spreading across the sky like old guardians. "You came for me," he said softly. "I stayed," she replied. "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, taking his hand, "we move forward together. Whatever comes next, we face it as one." He smiled, a genuine, soft smile. Together! The night air was still. Stars glittered faintly above. For the first time, the palace felt like more than stone and politics. It felt like home. And in that quiet moment, the Alpha realized the truth he had avoided for so long. It was not power that had changed him. It was trust. It was courage. It was the choice to open his heart. She had shown him that strength was not only in hiding, surviving, or controlling. It was in connection, in understanding, in shared burden and shared triumph. He looked at her, and for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a life beyond the shadows. A life with her.